Will the Rangers bounce back from a rough showing against the Winnipeg Jets? Will Mika Zibanejad find his game? We discuss all this and more in a special crossover edition with JD Young from Locked On San Jose Sharks.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1182 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com today to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, yeah, like I said, very special crossover edition here between, obviously, Locked On New York Rangers and Locked On San Jose Sharks. They're set to battle on Thursday night, and the Rangers are going to be on a road trip after that. Hopefully, they can obviously go into said road trip with a little bit of momentum and 2 points against a resurgent San Jose Sharks team. But like I said, we're going to be breaking it all down with JD Young from Locked On San Jose Sharks. Enjoy. All right, so with no further ado, let's go ahead and kick off this very special crossover edition of Locked On New York Rangers and Locked On San Jose Sharks. This is John Chick with Locked On Rangers, joined by my good friend JD Young of Locked On Sharks. And JD, you know, obviously Sharks off to an interesting start this season. They lose their first 9 out of the starting blocks, but they've really turned it on recently. They've gone 5-2-1 in their last 8. Kind of a broad question to kick things off here, but I mean, man, what's gotten into this team? How have they been able to right the ship and, you know, start playing some quality hockey here?
I think the big thing is you have a lot of pieces coming together, new coaching staff, right? A lot of free agents, a lot of draftees that are kind of making their debut. And you kind of expected this team to get off to a slow start, but you're starting to see a little bit of them kind of bear some fruit of what you expect this team to be. This is no way, like any way, shape, or form, some sort of playoff team. But the expectations for the Sharks is to just be competitive most nights, and you're starting to see that. And even in their 9-game losing streak to start the season, there were a lot of games where they were very competitive, but they're just such a talent-poor team that they just weren't able to finish the job. But they're starting to kind of figure things out a little bit, and you're seeing guys who, again, new pieces, new guys getting kind of familiar with what new head coach Ryan Warsofsky wants them to do and their new roles and all that. So I think now the team's starting to gel, that we've gotten to about a month into the season. You're starting to see a little bit of that progress.
Yeah, for sure. And somebody I got to ask you about is Celebrini. You know, obviously the highly touted first overall pick. Everybody knew he was going number 1. Had a goal and an assist in his NHL debut. Misses some time with an injury. He's back now. How do you feel about what you've seen so far from Celebrini? And were you totally on board with the idea of just throwing him right into the NHL, right off the bat there?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with the straight to NHL. I watched a bunch of them in college last year because it's better than watching the 2023-2024 San Jose Sharks. I watched a bunch of Celebrini in college, and the traits that he shows, especially as an 18-year-old kid, right? Then a 17-year-old kid in the NCAA where he was the best player in college hockey. He does things that are just well beyond his age. His ability to scan the ice and know where everyone is, and he's very physical for someone his age. He plays very solid defense, and that's only going to get better and better as he gets going. But I was 100% on board. There was no reason for him to go back to college. Like, he would have just basically cruised around for a year and put up a bajillion points. And this was the best thing for his kind of development, was to play NHL games. What I've seen from him is, I know there's been a lot of, he missed 12 games of injuries, but it's like every game you get something where you're just like, this dude's special. And it's a nice reward after last season to have a guy where you're just like, this dude's special, and he makes things happen that just other players can't. In the Sharks 5-2 loss to the Wild, he scores from just a little bit on the inside of the blue line. No look, just snipe over Marc-Andre Fleury's glove, and Fleury had no chance, just no chance. And you see stuff like that where you're like, man, once he figures things out, he's going to be a different guy.
That's crazy in and of itself, seeing the 18-year-old score on the 40-year-old, right? I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah, Fleury was in the NHL before
he was born,
Celebrini
right?
was born. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild to see things like that. But something else that the Sharks have done last year or two, bring in a couple of veterans, and it's funny listening to you talk about the Sharks right now and going through the rebuild. It's very similar, has kind of a similar vibe to where the Rangers were about 4 years ago when they were really young and trying to put all the pieces back together in their rebuild. But I said back then, and I'm curious to get your take on this, even for a rebuilding team, I do like the idea of having a couple of vets in the room to kind of lead the way. And one of the big ones for you guys, the free agent signing this offseason, Tyler Toffoli, former Cup champion, has played almost 100 Stanley Cup playoff games. Did you like that signing when they made it? And what are you seeing so far in Toffoli's tenure with the Sharks here?
Oh yeah, Toffoli I love that signing day one. He provides something the Sharks really desperately need, which is more scoring. He's been a little bit of a drought here over the past couple of weeks, and I kind of expect him to find how scores are, right. It usually comes in bunches with him, and I expect him to hit the back of the net really soon. But he's been great. They've basically stapled him to Macklin Celebrini since day one, giving Celebrini a nice veteran running partner, someone you see like even on the bench, the way the two interact. Toffoli's always kind of giving him tips and helping him out there. But their play styles are really complementary where Toffoli's great at scoring on the rush, and Macklin Celebrini is excellent in the transition game, just kind of creating offense and creating open space and then finding guys like Tyler Toffoli. So yeah, those two have been a great pairing so far. And I know the 4 years for a guy like Toffoli might seem a little long, but the Sharks have all the cap room in this world, especially when you have so many entry-level contracts, that even by the time that fourth year, like that contract it's not going to be worrisome for them. So
yeah, Toffoli is somebody that I talked about briefly in the offseason. Realistically, it always felt like kind of a pipe dream, him coming to the Rangers, because, the cap space, unlike the Sharks, the cap space just isn't there for the Rangers. But good to see the Sharks go out and get their guy. And obviously, he's going to be a big part of the leadership group as it pertains to getting that team, back on the right track. But another guy that's part of the leadership group over there, I would at least assume so, former Ranger and previously former Shark, Barkley Goodrow, now in his second stint with the team. Just kind of a weird situation how it all went down, because obviously Goodrow could block a trade, but they got around that by putting him on waivers and the Sharks claim him. I feel like, if I'm remembering correctly, I feel like we interacted a little on Twitter when that was happening, and I don't think this is your favorite move that the Sharks have ever did, but I'll let you speak for yourself, man. What were you thinking when it happened, and how's it gone so far?
Yeah, I like the Sharks, especially because beforehand they had made a lot of moves to kind of get guys similar to Barkley Goodrow, right? They re-signed Luke Cunnin. They traded for Ty Dellandrea. They traded for Carl Grundstrom. All those guys kind of in that same bottom six kind of grinder, penalty kill type of mold players. And I felt like you could have used that money elsewhere in free agency. But the deed is done, and we're trying to, kind of move past it. Goodrow, though, has been a really good influence so far. He's especially on the penalty kill. The Sharks penalty kill went through a little bit of a rough spot a couple weeks ago, but has really played much better. And of course, Goodrow is a big part of that. And he's got to be playing first line minutes in this game with Celebrini and Toffoli. And Celebrini did say he's going to try to get Goodrow a goal here. So we'll see if Celebrini can deliver on that. But, it is what it is. And I think Goodrow is definitely overpaid for his contract. And that was, I think, even, looking back, everyone said that was a ridiculous contract to give someone 6 years for that type of money. Proved out to be pretty true. And I think right now, though, he's kind of come to terms and been, a true professional, and kind of knows his role with the Sharks and what he's expected to do, and to kind of be a mentor to a lot of these young guys. And Goodrow, he's a true professional. He's embraced it. So,
yeah, for sure. And it's funny. I don't know if you saw his quotes from earlier today. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but basically he's had this game circled on the calendar. I don't think he was the biggest fan of how it all went down with the Rangers.
No, he was not.
Not in the slightest. And hey, look, I mean, Ranger fans, I think we mostly look back fondly on him. I mean, everybody kind of knew, like you said, that contract was a little bit much for him, both in terms of length and dollars per season. But hey, man, he went off in the playoffs for this team last year, scored some really big goals. I think he ended up with like significantly more goals in the playoffs than the entire regular season, which, I mean, as well as anybody, that Game 7 overtime winner he had for the Sharks all those years ago, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, he was, but like everybody when the Sharks made the move, a lot of Sharks fans, like, that's the first thing they remember. They remember all the like good stuff that he did, and he is beloved and is a kind of a hero in San Jose because of that game. But you look at, that was a long time ago. This much different team and kind of expectations. And it's going to be weird, though, because Goodrow has never missed the playoffs his entire career. And this is shaping up to be the first year where he's going to miss the playoffs. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it goes. But one more question about the Sharks, and then I figure, we can shift gears. You can ask me a few questions about the Rangers. But the goalie situation, Blackwood and Vanich, two veteran goalies that have, played for a couple of different teams. So far, they're basically an even split. I think it's like 9 games started for each of them, or might be 9 and 8 or something like that, but fairly even. Do you have a preference between the two of them, or are you cool to let them kind of go back and forth and just kind of duke it out until, a starter is established?
I think that's was the plan the whole time, is to be a true like split down the middle with them, because I think what happens, especially Mackenzie Blackwood, the more games, he kind of tends to wear down a little bit. You see some injury histories. Like even last year, he had kind of nagging injuries that would kind of, keep him out of the lineup for a week or two at a time. So I think from the Sharks' perspective, right, is to let these guys who are both at the final years of their contracts, let these guys kind of be an even split. Maybe you ride a hot hand for a little bit, but it usually kind of bounces itself out, and let the season play out, and one potentially gets traded at the trade deadline, and then you have Askarov, who the Sharks acquired this offseason, kind of the heir apparent waiting in the wings, who's been killing it in the AHL with the San Jose Barracuda. So I'm very much for the competition. I think right now you kind of see the best out of both of them. They both have had some stellar nights. Blackwood had a shutout against the Devils the other night where he 44 saves, including 19 in the third period. Was absolutely stellar in that game, and you see Vitek Vanacek has some really nice nights as well. So I expect that to go forward right now, and then until somebody gets hurt or somebody really falls off a cliff, and which could happen. But I think for the Sharks, they want to try to keep it as 50-50 as possible right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I figure, we'll keep everything rolling in just a second here. JD, I'm sure you got a couple of questions for me about the Rangers. We'll get to that, some predictions and all that fun stuff in just a second. All right, we just will take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers and Locked On San Jose Sharks is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
The World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, while SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. You invest so much time to take care of yourself and be the healthiest, best version of you. SelectQuote's exclusive policies can reward that effort. So get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL. Just go to selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. That's selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL.
All right, so we'll go ahead and keep everything rolling on this very special crossover edition here of Locked On Rangers and Locked On Sharks. And JD, I asked you a couple questions about the Sharks, so fire away. What do you got for me with the Rangers?
All right. I think, of course, we have to start with the big question with the Rangers right now. And when's Shesterkin going to get paid, and how much is it going to be?
So I predicted, honestly, going into the offseason, because, the Rangers, they make their run. They get to the Eastern Conference Final, back and forth with Florida, but unfortunately, they lose 3 in a row. They get knocked out. And then, as is the case with every team, when your season ends, your mind immediately goes to the offseason. Okay, who's a free agent? Who's going to get paid? Who's going to walk? All this stuff. With Igor Shesterkin, looking at the fact that he was going to go into the last year of his contract here and then be a UFA after the season that is now the current season, I predicted this. I felt like this was going to go on for a long time, that this could be a serious standoff because a couple of reasons. For starters, if you're Igor Shesterkin, you've put a lot of really good hockey on tape thus far in your career. You've got a Vezina. You've been a top 5 Vezina finalist, I believe, 3 times Igor's done that. And you've been a big-time playoff contributor as well. He really steps up his game in the playoffs. So from his perspective, I'm not really sure there was any true incentive to sign an extension this offseason, because if he just waits it out and goes through this season, at that point, he's able to then talk to a lot of other teams, and he's going to have that much more leverage on the Rangers. The only way that it backfires for Igor is if he has just like a really bad season, but he's betting on himself. I don't think too many people think that's going to happen. I mean, right? Yeah. So it really, like, from his point of view, there was probably no reason to sign the extension. But from the Rangers' perspective, going what the rumored offer was of 8 years and $11 million per season, making him the highest paid goalie of all time. I mean, that to me was a very generous offer. And I'll tell you and all the Locked On Sharks listeners what I've said all along here. 2 things can be true. Ranger fans can be a little bit annoyed by this and think like, come on, dude, we just tried to make you the highest paid goalie in the history of the sport. Well, that's not good enough. So Ranger fans can feel that way. But by that same token, Igor Shesterkin, I mean, he can play this any way he wants to play. He's within his right. But it could backfire just because you look at the other elite goalies in the NHL, they're all around like 8 million, 8.5 million, and some newer contracts too. Connor Hellebuck, I think, is like at 8.5. Swayman's at around 8.5. Ullmark just got 8 million. Jake Ottinger's like 8.25 or something like that. It's all in that same ballpark. So I'm fine with Igor being paid more than those guys, but $4 million more a season? No, that's too much. And I feel like, again, this is a stalemate for all those reasons, and this could go on for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he's trying to be that guy who resets the market for goalies, because, right, if he gets paid that, then the next goalie is going to be like, well, if he got that, I want that. And you wonder, at some point it's going to happen, especially with the cap going up. There's going to be that market reset contract. It's just who's going to be the guy. And yeah, I'm sure Shesterkin, he has every right to be that guy because, I mean, I think other than Hellebuck, there's no other goalie I think who means as much to his team's success and than it's Shesterkin and Hellebuck, and you could say Hellebuck is vastly underpaid for what he does. So of course I want to ask a guy who knows not had a great start, Mika Zibanejad. What's the deal, bro?
Dude, I wish I knew. Where do I even begin? This last game against the Jets, no exaggeration. And I'm not somebody that tends to pile on players. Like, it's just not my style unless, like, they really need to be called out. Mika Zibanejad needs to be called out. He had, in the game against the Jets, the 14-1 Jets, 3 turnovers that led almost directly right to Jets goals. And so far this season, I mean, it just feels like he's not locked in. He's not engaged. He just doesn't have his A game. There's just something that's off with Mika Zibanejad right now. They basically took their line combinations from early in the season when they were dominating teams. Now, some of the teams they beat weren't necessarily the best teams, but they were still winning. And these lines were working. And what they did, initially they had Mika with Kreider and Riley Smith. And to kind of, I think, mostly to get Mika Zibanejad going, they put Mika with Panarin and Lafreniere. And all that's happened since then is Panarin and Lafreniere, who were on fire to start the season, all of a sudden are not nearly as productive as they were when they were with Trocheck. So I don't know, man. I mean, something just feels a little bit off. I would not even be opposed to a Mika Zibanejad healthy scratch at this point, and I don't say that lightly at all. But that's the way it's gone. The effort just hasn't been there the way that you need it to be there. I mean, this is a team with Stanley Cup championship aspirations, and you've got, your number one center that's just not bringing it every night. So I don't know. I think eventually a message needs to be sent. I think he'll eventually get it turned around. I mean, he's got to be better than this. But yeah, I mean, fair to say at this point that Ranger fans are expecting, and rightly so, expecting more out of Mika Zibanejad.
All right. We do have a nice kind of parallel here, right? With the Rangers, when they kind of started the rebuild and before Panarin kind of fell in their laps and, expedited this whole process. But, the Rangers, they selected Alexei Lafreniere, number 1 overall, then they select Capo Caco, second pick overall. The Sharks, Will Smith last year, and now they have Macklin Celebrini. And, I think Will Smith, who's has some struggles and maybe hasn't shown as many flashes as Celebrini, you kind of compare it to Capo Caco, who's, I think, definitely say he's had his struggles and maybe not shown as many flashes. What's that experience like, especially for Sharks fans? I know a lot of Sharks fans maybe being a little impatient with Will Smith as a 19-year-old trying to navigate his first season. You got to tell, right? You have to be patient with these kids. It's a long season and a long process, right?
Yeah. There's definitely some parallels there, and you and other Sharks fans are going to go through like a whole roller coaster of emotions while these guys are on the up and up. Lafreniere, I think it took him until like his 13th or 14th game, something like that, to get his first point. Caco obviously debuted the year before that, and he too struggled out of the starting blocks. And you go through stretches where they're not very effective, they're not very noticeable, they don't really produce a lot of offense. Then you get these flashes every now and then. It's like, okay, now I see why this guy went number 1. Now I see why this guy went number 2. And it's there's going to be some inconsistencies. Not everybody gets to be Connor McDavid out of the starting blocks. I mean, for you and other Sharks fans, I hope that Smith and Celebrini can do that. They can hit the ground running and be those dudes right at the starting blocks, especially Celebrini. He's just getting going. But not everybody develops at the same rate, and you see what Alexei Lafreniere did last year. I think at times, and Ranger fans pointed this out too, the usage of both Lafreniere and Caco left something to be desired. Not a lot of ice time, always in the bottom 6. They make one mistake, they're going to see their ice time greatly reduced.
Yep.
And I think Laviolette has been a positive influence on both those players. Even Caco, I think, is playing so far this season maybe the best hockey that he's played thus far with the Rangers. So, yeah, man, it's going to be a little bit up and down. It's not linear, but I think if you stay the course with those guys and you stay patient, you're eventually going to like what you see, because they're both obviously tremendously talented players.
Yeah, I think especially it's right. It's also hard too when you have two players like this, where it's hard not to compare what they do, and sometimes you have to be like, even these guys who are similar situations, they're going to have their own timelines and they have their own skill sets. And a guy like Celebrini, who's right now just a better 200-foot player, and is right now is a better player than Will Smith, but like it's just a different skill set. You have to let these guys develop at their own pace. And I'm sure you went through the same thing with Capo Caco and Lafreniere. Like they're two different guys with two different skill sets. You have to let them do their own thing. And it's hard not to compare the children, but you have to, sometimes you can't compare the children. So
yeah, that's just the way it goes sometimes. It's just the nature of the beast. But
yes.
Yeah, man, I figure we'll keep everything rolling in just a second here, and we'll get to some final thoughts, some predictions, some matchups to keep an eye on, all that fun stuff. We will go ahead and do that in just a second.
PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to play sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. And it's also the best place to get real money sports action, so you can join over 10 million users and sign up today. If you do sign up today, you get $50 instantly when you play your first $5. You don't need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So with PrizePicks, you can win money as your favorite players collect points. So if you think Macklin Celebrini has more than half a goal on him, pick more and you'll on their PrizePick entry, and you turn your predictions into cash. So download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game.
All right, and so to conclude this special crossover edition, JD, I figure a couple, final questions here and some predictions maybe, but again, kind of a theme through this whole crossover here is the parallels between these teams, and the Rangers going through the rebuild a couple of years ago, the Sharks doing the same thing right now, and I think like as a Ranger fan back then, what you really want is you want to see the vision for your team, and okay, how are we going to get back to being contenders? And I usually did. More often than not, I usually had an idea of what the Rangers were doing and the direction they wanted to go. So I'm wondering for you, just generally speaking, like with the Sharks, like, do you see the vision? Do you think this is moving in the right direction? And they, like you said, probably not playoffs this year, maybe as soon as next year?
I still think that's a lot to ask for, especially because this team is very much like we want to build through the draft. You know, they've had a lot of first-round picks. They had 2 first-round picks last year in Macklin Celebrini and Sam Dickinson, who's lighting up the OHL. The year before, 2 first-round picks of Will Smith and Quentin Musty. You have Phil Beested, who they drafted the year before. William Eklund the year before. Like, they are very much like we are going to be, want to center around our first round picks because they feel like that is the best way to have sustained success, right? Is draft and develop. You don't want to be one of those flash in the pan teams that maybe puts a team together, you make the playoffs, and then, right, you never heard of from again. So I think that's their thing, is they want to kind of focus around having these young guys and then getting the right pieces around them. So the goal for them this year is just to be competitive, and you're already starting to see that. Can you be competitive night in, night out? And I think some of the veteran players right now, like Mikael Granlund, who's leading the team in points. You have guys like Tyler Toffoli. Then you have some young players like William Eklund and Fabian Zetterlund, and as well as Will Smith. Like, you see all the pieces kind of starting to come together here, and I do believe this team is heading in the right direction. But I've been trying to preach patience, right? Patience, because it's I think a lot of times, especially with fans of other sports, you see like a football team can go from worst to first, or you see teams like, in basketball, teams can go from worst to first. In hockey, it's a long process. And I think you have to kind of try not to put the cart in front of the horse when it comes to rebuild sometimes. But overall, though, I think this team will be competitive, and long, sustained competitive window is the goal.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite questions to do near the end of these crossover episodes, I always like to ask, the other host, is there like an under-the-radar player or two on the Sharks that us Ranger fans should keep an eye on? Like somebody that's maybe not a household name, but he's been impressing you and playing well recently? 1 or 2 players?
I just mentioned him, but Mikael Granlund, he has been, since the Sharks acquired him in the Erik Karlsson trade, he has been the Sharks' best player. He's basically at a point per game right now, which may not be super impressive when you have like Panarin and stuff, but when you're playing on this Sharks team, which barely can't even get over 3 goals a game, and you're producing at a point per game, that is pretty impressive if you ask me. He does everything for the Sharks. He plays a bajillion minutes a night, like 24 minutes a night type of guy. For San Jose, he's on the penalty kill, on the power play. He's going to be on second line minutes, that the Lund line, as we call it, with William Eklund, Mikael Granlund, and Fabian Zetterlund. That line right now is kind of the engine for the Sharks, and if that line can get things going, they usually means success for the Sharks. So I think that's something to watch for in this matchup. I know, again, the Rangers are a pretty well balanced team, but if the Lund line can start to establish stuff, that's usually kind of their path to success.
Absolutely. And for the Rangers, if I'm going with an under-the-radar player, I'm going to throw out Will Cooley for you guys, second-year player, really impressive rookie season last year, and just a hard-hitting player who's adding some more offense to his game this year, playing on the same line as Philip Hedl and Capo Caco. Those 3 have really gelled together this year. There are a lot of games where they're the best line on the ice for the Rangers, and a really impressive stat from those 3, they have not, when they've been together, they were briefly broken up, but they've mostly played the entire season together. They still have yet to give up a goal against on the entire season. So that is like big time hockey, and that's big time stuff from your third line there. And Cooley in particular, I mean, he can shoot it, but he can get some blue collar goals too. Very quietly right now on pace for just under 30 goals this season. And it's early, small sample, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? He's still off to, a really nice start this season. So I'll say Will Cooley. Do we want to do predictions for the game itself? You want to throw out a final score or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I got Rangers. I'll say 4-2. I think the Sharks, they're like a 40-minute team right now. They'll give you 2 good periods and then 1 period that's bad. It's the guess is just which is the bad period. Is it the first period or is it the third period? The second period, they're usually not too bad. But the Sharks, I'll say they get 2. Give me something. Celebrini does something special. Every game he does something special where you're just like, oh yeah, that kid's different. Give me one of those. So whether it's an assist or a sweet pass or something, he just does something special.
Yeah, I'll throw out kind of a random prediction to build on what you just said there. The Sharks, if they do have a bad period, it won't be the second period, because I think mostly this season, if the Rangers have a period where they scuffle a little bit, just don't have their A game, it feels like it's the second period more often than the other 2. So I don't think you have to worry about that. The Rangers need to be on their toes in the second period for this game for sure. I've been trying to get a good feeling about this game, and I'm kind of nervous about it because the Sharks have been playing well, and just some weird stuff going on with the Rangers where a lot of really important players just don't have their A game right now, despite what the team's record is. I'm going to say the Rangers, though, eventually drag themselves over the finish line. They win this game 3-2 in their first shootout of the season. I'm going to say it goes to a shootout. It's back and forth the whole way. The Sharks put in a spirited effort. They stay with them all the way. Rangers just find a way to edge them at the very end in a shootout.
I think as Sharks fans, if you get a point out of this, you're going to be feeling pretty good because you got 2 points against the Devils. You got a point that you probably didn't deserve against the Flyers, and then getting a point against the Rangers. And you play a Penguins team, which is teetering right now. That could be a really nice road trip for the Sharks here. If you get manage to get points in all games, all 4 games, I think most Sharks fans would take that right now.
Yeah, you guys can go ahead and beat the Penguins. I'll never argue against that. I'll be happy to cheer for you guys that night.
Yes, Saturday night. It's gonna be fun. I'm actually really excited for that game just because I think, like I said, the Penguins team. Also, last year the Penguins put 10 up on the Sharks at one point, so it would be nice to kind of stick it to the Penguins a little bit right now. So
I hear you there for sure, man. All right, cool. So yeah, figure we can call it there. But JD, this is a ton of fun as always, man. And I haven't checked the schedule, but when they play each other again, happy to do this again if you're up for it.
Always, buddy. Good talking to you.
All right, man. So Ranger fans, Sharks fans, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.